Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You're free to like or dislike the video, so please feel free to hit those buttons and feel free to comment below. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. Today is Friday, and I'm recording it on Friday, a Friday video. Where I usually address comments and various discussions that I've had throughout the week. And so it's a little bit more informal. I want to emphasize that this is a little bit more informal. My arguments may not be like crystal clear. This is just me often thinking off the top of my head when related to issues. And also I'm just trying to answer questions the best I can with what the information I have. And so that's kind of where I'm going with this today. There's a lot of things that people have asked me about, and some of them are political science things, but also some of them are a little bit psychology. I'm not an expert in psychology, of course, and I never claimed to be. I have taken a few social psychology classes that are related to politics and how groups of people act and things like that, because it's important in politics to understand the motivations of people. I'm a religious expert in the sense that I've been in it a long time, and I have a couple of degrees in that. And there's an observation I want to make today when I talk about politics and religion. I think it was last week or the week before, I talked about how religion and politics have very similar tactics and strategies to get people to control people. And one of those things that somebody brought up to me was, well, what about slogans? What about political slogans or slogans that people use all the time trying to get people to behave a certain way? And I said, well, yeah, that's right out of the religious mantra playbook. A mantra is something you say over and over and over and over again until it becomes part of your thought process and a regular part of your thought process. The reason it's so effective is that especially with children and teenagers as well, but as your mind gets more complex, it gets difficult for this to work. But if you say something over and over enough, it becomes something that you can't forget, and then it kind of dominates your thought patterns. And that's why when it comes to political slogans, you need to understand, that's why I don't trust them. Whenever I see a political slogan or a slogan that everybody's using, I'm very much distrusting of it because I know the effect that has on personal psychology. If you get a religious person, for instance, to say, Our Father is the Lord's Prayer 100 million times so they know it like the back of their head, they will begin to think in terms of God based on that prayer. And it allows people, well, what does this prayer say? And it starts to get you to think that way. And that's a real problem for me. Now, the problem is I see politics do it too. I'm going to use a few slogans. I'm not taking any political side here. Probably the two most famous in the last few years are Change We Need, which was Obama's slogan when he first ran. And then, of course, Make America Great Again, which is also a slogan. I dislike slogans because there's a broad generality to them in the first place. Make America Great Again, I'm like, well, first of all, there's an assumption behind that, whether America was great before or not. And that, what is your definition of great? What do you mean by that? Because as an American, I know that I can sit down with 10 of my fellow Americans and we'll have 11 different answers what it meant for America to be great. So it's kind of relative. Change We Need was kind of that way too. What changes in what particular way, and why do we need them? I'm the kind of guy that hears crap like that, and I'm immediately asking questions. A modern one, and this might light a little bit more fires, but the right one now that bothers me most is stay home, stay safe, because it's clearly, in my opinion, a mantra. What happens if new scientific data comes along and says, you know what, staying home is not going to make you safe. In fact, it's actually put you more at risk. Would you believe it? If you've said this mantra 100 million times, that kind of information is going to lead to resistance. You're being trained when you say this mantra over and over again to resist any contrary idea. That's why mantras are effective. If you can get, for instance, in religion, a person to state the religious belief over and over again to the point that's all they think about, somebody coming along with contrary information is not going to be received. And so I'm always cautious about slogans. I don't like them. I immediately ask questions, and I try not to say things over and over again unless I really truly feel that it's a good idea, because it just destroys a person's ability to think freely for themselves, and you have to be careful with that. Another thing, I was actually it wasn't really directly put this way. It was like, how do you, why is name calling such a big thing for you? Because name calling is ultimately the oldest, most common logical fallacy there is. It's called ad hominem. Ad hominem is an attack on the humanity of the person. It's a logical fallacy for two reasons. Number one, it assumes something about the character of the individual. I see this all the time. You'll hear somebody make an argument and, well, you're just a dumb Trumpite, or you're just a dumb Obamaite, or whatever. That's in politics. But in religion, you'll see this too. It comes out in things like, you Calvinists just want to sin or whatever, or you just want to, you don't want to take responsibility for your actions. It's when you start addressing the character of the person you're arguing against, and you're trying to demean their character in some way, either through name calling or insinuating something about their character, it's ad hominem. And I've seen a lot of this during the lockdown phase. I'm actually a person who supports ending the lockdown as soon as possible, because I'm looking at the data and I'm seeing that we have very much flattened the curve. We've never even really got close to putting our medical facilities at overload across the country. There was a couple hot spots, but for the most part, we weren't even close, and we're definitely on the decline. The purpose of this was never to just wait it out until the virus disappears. The purpose of this was to not overtax our medical resources with the first wave hit. We need to open up, because this virus is going to infect all of us probably eventually. It will happen. And so the quicker that happens, in some ways, the better. Herd immunity is a real thing. I've read some research papers on it, and anybody with an access to Google Scholar can just type in the words herd immunity, and they'll get scholarly papers on it and why it works. So that is a real thing. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things about this virus we don't know, but there's a bunch of things we do. And one of the things we do know is that it has a very low killing rate. And that's why I kind of support the end of the quarantine, because for me, it's kind of like if I went into a cancer center, treatment center, and I'm diagnosed with cancer, and I'm sitting down looking at my treatment options, and they go, well, you have cancer, but here's the thing about this particular form of cancer. We can treat it. There's a very good chance that you'll never experience symptoms while we treat it. There's also a very good chance that if you do experience symptoms, they might be very, very severe, but you'll be okay. The thing about this form of cancer is you have a 98.5% chance of survival. Would I consider such news bad news? No, I wouldn't. I'm also beginning to see some of the downsides to a quarantine pile up. I know, for instance, there's a pretty good correlation between unemployment statistics and the suicide rate. And it's not necessarily a causation. There's a lot of causes and reasons why that is. But, we can usually kind of predict the suicide rate based on the unemployment rate and how many people are unemployed. And we can then kind of predict how many people are going to kill themselves. We can do that. That's part of political science, is figuring out how that works. And the longer people are unemployed, the more people are going to die that way. You're also going to see some death in the fact that non-essential surgeries, especially when it comes to things like cancer and physical disabilities and things like that, have a tendency to become essential over time. Something that could have been dealt with earlier a lot easier will get worse over time, and you're going to see that the longer the hospitals are now not allowed to take all patients. We need to get our hospitals open up. They're not overtaxed right now, and this would be a good time to get them in. I look at all that and say that there's a lot more problems to me from my standpoint with the quarantine than with COVID-19. That's me. I know that people are going to disagree with it. But it's also brought to my attention a few bad arguments against lifting the lockdown. One of them was leveled at somebody very close to me, and it kind of pissed me off. You just want people to die. Now, I know the person this was directed to. They're one of the kindest people I know. They just have a lot of compassion, and they could see the bigger picture. They have to deal with people that have lost their jobs. They've had to deal with people that are not getting the medical care that they need, and have had to deal directly with a relative that almost died because they didn't get the medical care they need because of COVID-19. They care about the economy, because the economy, when I see business owners that have owned their business for 20 years talking about bankruptcy, that's been their livelihood for 20 years. What are they going to do? Okay. Landmark, iconic things that have been around forever closing down. I just don't see this as living anymore. I'd rather live and take the risk than not live. But this is a lousy argument based on some of the stuff that I said before. One, it's an ad hominem attack. It's an attack on this person I know's character. I know that that's not true. Okay, it's not. That's not the issue. It's also not really dealing with the argument. The issue is coming off lockdown going to be good for us? What are there going to be risks? Yeah, welcome to planet Earth. There are risks in living life. I've had anxiety issues myself, but I have less and less of them now that I'm not really a Christian, by the way. But people would say, how's that possible? Well, when you're not worried about an old powerful God ready to gig you all the time because you do something wrong, you suddenly realize that person's an imaginary character. You begin to realize that a lot of reasons that you were anxious are full of shit. So you just kind of discard them. But anyway, getting back to this argument, it's not that I want people to die. I mean, I could easily reverse that argument, but it would still be just as invalid. Well, you want people to die of suicide and not getting the medical treatment they need for other issues. See how easy that was to flip it around? Now, I'm assuming something about your character, and I'm not really dealing with an argument. But, of course, then you're not really laying an argument by laying an ad hominem attack. I saw another bad argument that was kind of like this. Here in Michigan, we had people take guns on the Capitol steps and protest the excessive quarantine rules. And I saw a lot of people being accused of being childish. This is just childish. You're just acting like a child asking for your rights. Number one, once again, that's an ad hominem attack. It doesn't prove anything. Two, recently, the governor of Michigan, Governor Whitmer, has made several accusations that these protesters were spreading COVID. But when she was asked directly what evidence she had for that, she said, well, I don't really have any evidence. So what she's basically admitted to, she was just engaged in an ad hominem attack without proving anything, which is garbage. Okay, it's just garbage. It's just a garbage argument. Human rights are important things to fight for, regardless of what time it is. And to me, human rights are not just the right to live, it's also the right to liberty, okay? Freedom, I mean, if you're going to start saying that being free, being a person of liberty is a selfish thing, then the alternative is, okay, so being a slave is not selfish? Because I can easily turn that one on its head too and go, well, so you're advocating for slavery. Because the opposite of liberty is slavery. Okay, do you see how easy that was to turn around? And I would be engaged in the same problem. I'm not, for me, a question of rights is not a question. I don't think it's childish. It's not something I would have done. I believe in following the legal processes to fight for rights and taking the time to do it. But I get why these people did it. They're questioning whether or not the government has the right to do what it's doing. And you know what? That's something that should always be questioned. It should absolutely always be questioned. Now, I'm not sure I would have done it the same way they did it, but I would not deny them the right to do it. I don't think the constitutional rights just go out the window because there's a crisis. You still have to respect people as human beings. And to me, the idea of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are basic human fundamental rights. And no government should be able to take those away. Now, that's, of course, well, what would you have done? Well, I've done a lot of damn things different. The first thing I would have done is get more information. I think making a policy decision without a real understanding of how COVID works, you could end up doing the wrong thing, causing more harm than good. Some of the best intentions have led to the greatest amount of harm in life, and especially when there's a crisis like this. So there you have it. Another political policy question I was asked this week about masks, and it was the question was more along the line of, well, why does the CDC say one thing and the Surgeon General say another? Well, because they're both right and they're both wrong. Here's the thing with masks. Masks are a mixed blessing. They can prevent you from spreading the virus to other people, sort of. They're actually not really sure about that. Other COVID viruses go right through masks, and they don't necessarily stop them. So whether the mask is more for all of us to feel psychologically better about being around a person, or whether they're actually helpful is a debatable point. I'm not going to fall one way or the other. I don't know I have any scientific data but there has been that accusation. The Surgeon General is taking the tack because wearing a mask causes, and this is a study that was done, when people wear a mask, like in a surgery, they touch their face like 23 times more. That's what the Surgeon General was going, hey, this COVID virus, you're not supposed to touch your face. I haven't heard that directive in a while, though. It's been interesting that directive has kind of disappeared as soon as the mask showed up, because they know flat out that you're going to touch your face a whole hell of a lot more with a mask on. And that's just true. The upside of the mask, of course, and the reason why the CDC seems, I want to use that word seems, to support wearing masks more is that you may not, you have a less chance of spreading the virus from yourself to other people. If you're infected, it can help mitigate that. So it's really a mixed blessing with masks. As it was pointed out to me in other, I can't even remember where, but it was pointed out to me a couple of places that there's a reason how nurses and doctors wear masks is a little bit different, and it's not how it fits on their face. But whenever they get a chance, they pull it off and breathe. And the reason for that is there is, when you wear a mask, a couple of risks. One, any viruses that you have that are caught by the mask stay by your mouth. And part of the way we have of fighting immunizations is exhaling, getting rid of it out of our body. Our body will get rid of it through our lungs. Well, if you collect that in mass and it doesn't really get rid of it and go right back down in, that also creates a hot spot where the air that you're breathing is warmer, and that can make you sleepy, it can make you sluggish, it can make you irritable. That's why masks, you have to every once in a while take them down and gulp some fresh air. That's why masks are a controversy, because there's good points and there's bad points. Now I suppose I'm getting to a few other things. There was a discussion I had on Facebook the other day about non-essential and political correctness. It was something I was thinking about, and I did get a response to it. But I was thinking about political correctness and the relationship to the non-essential employee, and I was asking the question, where the hell are the political correct people on this idea of labeling a worker non-essential? That seems to be very demeaning. Labeling a business non-essential, that seems to be very condescending. Non-essential to who? Okay, from my perspective, non-essential and essential are kind of bullshit terms. because from an economic standpoint, what's essential, what's valuable is really based on what the person is willing to spend for it. And that's just a true economic truth. A glass of the water, here in my apartment is not nearly as valuable as a glass of water in the middle of a desert to a person dying of thirst. Both are needed, but in one context it's better, in one context it's not. Also, it really depends on the eye of the beholder. A small business owner is about to lose his business because it's been labeled non-essential. Sure as hell thinks it's essential to him. And I think the whole thing really stinks. And what was bothering me is, where's the political correct crowd on this? They're usually all over bad language, but they weren't on this one. And a friend of mine offered up the comment. He says, here's my 2 cents. He says, if we had used this in front of work, instead of in front of workers or business, what if we said non-essential person? That changes the game a little bit, doesn't it? But aren't we kind of saying that certain non-essential workers are non-essential people when it comes to fighting this crisis? That, you're as a person, you're just not very valuable right now. Same with the business. And it's simply the designation worker or business that keeps this from being absolutely slammed by the political correct crowd. Because if you really got down to the nitty-gritty, you were saying that these people are non-essential as people too. You could make that argument. And, I really think that, that's just kind of, I've thought that this whole thing was really bad from the get-go, and it just creates as if we need another couple of tribes to fight each other in this country. Let's invite more tribalism. That ought to be great. I had a lot of questions, and I don't even really want to deal with this half the time. What about Governor Whitmer? Is what she doing right or wrong? Well, in order for the governor to do an executive order regarding people's behavior, she has to have a state of emergency. She can declare a state of emergency for a short period of time, and then she has to get the legislature to extend that state of emergency. Governor Whitmer is doing something unprecedented in the fact that she has said that she's going to maintain her executive order, but also she hasn't gone to the legislature to get that extended. In fact, they voted not to extend the state of emergency. So she doesn't really have a state of emergency to hinge her executive order on. Now, there's supposed to be a lot of court cases involving this over the next couple of weeks, but by that time it's too late. I know Wisconsin already said, sorry, Governor, you're not allowed to do that. And I think this is probably, if this ever gets to the state Supreme Court of Michigan, they're probably going to say the same thing. They're going to look at the laws pretty clear. I know she's trying to go on this 1945 law thing, but that's for more of a state of war, in my opinion, than anything else. And I'm no legal expert, but it seems to me that it's designed for, like, Michigan is being invaded by a foreign power. Let's say the Canadians decide to come across the lake and, take Michigan for themselves. Not for something like a plague or the whole point of this, and the reason this exists, is because we don't want one person handling the crisis. We want input from the various representatives across the state that represent different areas and different ways of doing business. Even in my state of Michigan, what's true in Traverse City area up north is way different than Detroit. There's different concerns, different things, different ways of doing business, different ways of living, different culture in a lot of respect. And that means that you kind of have to listen to everybody's concerns. And, other governors have recognized this, and they've opened up the rural areas of their state more than the urban ones, because the urban ones are actually more at risk. And, there's also the issue, I think, the biggest one that's been brought up to me most of the time, and I'll give you my 2 cents on it. And that is, why aren't certain businesses allowed to open? And I have to ask that question too. I work at a grocery retail place. Okay. I'm not going to go into too many details. I really work hard not to mention my employers, either here or when I write publicly. But I watch every day as people come into our store, and yes, they're there to buy groceries, but they'll also pick up, say, a shirt, or they'll pick up a part for the car, or they'll go get gardening supplies. And the question becomes, at this point, if we are allowed to do that, we're allowed to sell all those things, and the only reason we're allowed to sell those things is we also have an attached grocery store. Why wouldn't it also be possible for people who have stores that sell just those things to be open as well, as long as they follow the same guidelines and rules? And this is becoming a really damn dogging question to me. I think if anybody can follow a certain set of guidelines, they should be allowed to open up. And give that to each business owner. Give them the ability to take ownership of their situation. I think right now the reason why Governor Whitmer is getting so much pushback is she's not empowering these people to do something about it. And she needed to do that a long time ago. I almost did a video offering Governor Whitmer my services as a political advisor, because whoever is advising her right now is doing a piss poor job of it. When this all started back in April, when there was the group Michiganders Against Excessive Quarantine started, I would have advised the governor back then, number one, you need to go to the legislature and start talking to them. You need to present your data. She still hasn't presented the data. She still, as far as I can tell, she's not communicating with the legislature hardly at all. She's really Lone Rangering it, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. In politics, she's going to pay a pretty hefty political price tag for that, I think. You know, when all this is over, you can bet that 45 law will be struck from the records, and you may even see other laws passed, and maybe even constitutional amendments that will further restrict the power of the governor during a crisis because of her. Okay, congratulations, this is your legacy, Governor Whitmer. But I would have said, you know, back when these people were scared, they wanted to know what was going to happen to their businesses. To some people, this is everything to them. They have spent 10, 20, 30 years developing this, developing a clientele, trying to make this work. And you're going to wave it all away because you're afraid. Now, as I said with my other argument, it's not that they're unconcerned with the people dying from COVID. They're concerned about how they're going to put food on the table, a lot of them. And they've suddenly been deemed non-essential as both people and a business. Yeah, I'd say they have good reason to be pissed off if you're not going to offer them any hope. And if I had been Governor Whitmer's advisor, I would have said, Governor Whitmer, you need to meet with the leaders of these people and talk about what it's going to take and listen to them about their business. And if they make an analogy that says, well, Walmart's going to be allowed to stay open, or Myers is going to be allowed to stay open, and Myers is a local chain. If, you know, Lowe's, Menards, all those guys are going to be stayed open if they follow certain guidelines. Why can't I, as a small business owner, do the same? And that's a really damn good question. It is a good damn question, and it should have been addressed. And I would have sat down with the leaders of that movement, and you would have never gotten the first protest in the first place. It's almost like she wanted the protest. And then she doubles down and she doubles down and she gets out there and says, well, if you don't obey the rules, I'm going to make it harder. Well, now you're not talking about examining the data anymore. You're just pissed off because they didn't do what you told them to do. Governor, if you haven't noticed by now, we live in a democracy. This means that our elected representatives are allowed to have a voice on our behalf. And when you shut them down and don't listen to them, when you don't work with them, you're the leader of the state. Show some leadership. This isn't leadership. This is a spoiled child throwing a temper tantrum because people aren't doing what they're telling them. Sorry, you know, you're acting like a brat. I'm going to be blunt. It's a bratty behavior. I didn't get my way, so therefore I'm going to put more punishments. That's an abusive relationship. Okay, that is a hallmark element of abusive. Is that how you view your constituents? As somebody to abuse? I don't know. I mean, I'm a little bit angry about this because I personally think a lot of this could have been avoided just by some good advice and meeting with people instead of Lone Rangering it like this. I think she's going to end up eating it. And I don't think it's going to take as long as people think. I think the real issue is getting this case before the Michigan Supreme Court. And once that ruling comes down, it's going to come down. But I'm going to say something else. I think the people of Michigan are already tired of the quarantine and they're not obeying the rules. Just last night I was watching a video by Jack O'Malley, who represents the 101st District, the 101. And he's saying, you know, the governor told, you know, we went from 50% of people doing stay at home to 39%. You know, that means 61% of people are not staying at home in Michigan right now. And it's getting bigger. And I just did a shift at work, and I'm going to tell you right now, social distancing is breaking down too. People are not social distancing. They're not. And they're not going to go back to it either. They're sick of it. It's not natural for human beings to stay 6 feet apart. We didn't survive that way. Human beings have banded together for centuries and fought off enemies, and they've taken comfort from one another. When people ask me, you know, to accept the new normal, I tell them to go to hell, because to me, normal was, you know, normal, that's another, you know, emotionally loaded word, because normal for me is when I see somebody on a park bench, obviously having a hard time, I want to sit down next to them and say, hey, can I help? The normal to me was everybody having a job at least so that they could take care of themselves. Being self-reliant and industrious is something I stand for. I don't really see that anymore. I think we're way too reliant, and the government is using this as a way to make us even more reliant on them, and I don't think we should be. I don't think we can trust the bastards. So that's just kind of where I'm at. I just don't know. I don't want this new normal. I liked, maybe the old normal wasn't perfect, but it sure as hell a lot better than this. And I'm still working. I don't have the worry, but if prices keep going up like they are, my wages ain't going to be shit. Okay, I'm making less and less money all the time. And that's kind of one of the problems with this. You know, you create shortages and the price goes up, and that's just economic law. And that's just the way it is. Eventually it happens. You can pass all the no gouging regulations you want, but if somebody goes out of business, then they can't provide a service at all. They got to make enough money to at least defray their costs. So there's that. This has been a little bit longer video than usual, but there was just a whole bunch of stuff this week, and I'm fairly certain I didn't address it all to proper rabid atheist standards, but I think it's some of the things that I'm just addressing comments and responding to them. You're certainly more than welcome to disagree with me and leave a comment of why you think it is, but, you know, in a moment I'll tell you what you can't do. Welcome to my channel again. Comments have a way of influencing and determining the content of Friday's videos, and as you can see this week I got a lot of them, mostly off YouTube, and I will respond to them when I can. You can also ask direct questions anytime if you're looking to understand something, and you can always suggest what you'd like to see me do. Videos are uploaded Tuesday and Friday, although that may change. I'm not really sure yet. I'm working on something else. One thing I do not tolerate is name calling, because it is an ad hominem attack. It is a useless piece of shit argument, and it needs to be dropped from society. I am getting so sick and tired of people insinuating things about people's character and thinking it's an argument. It's not. It's a lousy piece of shit move is what it is. Okay, it's just garbage. I don't allow it here, and it's for that reason. Okay, I'm not going to call those people a name, but I don't allow it here because it's just ad hominem. It's an old, stupid fallacy, and it just needs to be dropped from humanity. Don't assume something about you. Listen to what their argument is and respond to their argument. Don't just call them some sort of name. Be sure to like, subscribe, and get your notifications, and hopefully I can someday convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Rabyd the Rabid Atheist saying goodbye, and be safe, and have a good day.